G'day, it's Jamie, and welcome to Where's My Yowie. Today, I'm reading an old Aussie bush yarn about cattle droving, so we'll get into it. This was published in the Sydney Mail on Wednesday, the 2nd of February, 1921, titled In the Droving Days by Muzaffar. We were travelling in from Queensland with a large mob of store cattle, and having crossed the border of New South Wales close to Gadooga, we went on towards Angel Dool. The cattle were almost as quiet as milking cows through starvation, there not being a blade of grass on the stock routes, for we were passing through a heat wave, and though Pollard, the boss, had the name of a great grass stealer, yet he had but little scope for his talents in this direction for some weeks past, simply because there was no grass to steal. It was hard work to hustle the poor beasts along at all, as the heat was something awful, about 122 degrees in the shade, and goodness knows what in the broiling sun, and we were hard put to keep the regulation distance which the law compels cattle to travel every day. Pollard, Fegan the cook, and I were the only white men in the camp, but we had with us some of the very best Aboriginal boys it has ever been my lot to meet. They had been with Pollard for years on almost every stock route in Queensland and New South Wales, and almost worshipped him. Over and above this, they were all splendid riders and thoroughly at home on a cattle camp, their quiet ways when riding around the sleeping beasts being a great contrast to those of many of the white men I have seen. And in consequence, we had only one rush since we started. After we left Gadooga, Pollard went ahead himself to report our coming to the stations through which we must pass, and also to look out for a place where there was a possible chance of giving the poor beasts a bellyful of stolen grass. The second day out, he unexpectedly returned just as we were at supper, washing down hunks of salt meat and damper with quarts of billy tea. Calling me on one side, he said, "I've struck it, Jones. There has been a heavy thunderstorm on Nulla Nulla Station, and there is a splendid feed. Young green grass mixed in with dry, in old Tommy Lambswell's paddock just off the road. And though the old fellow is as mean as they make them, and is up to most of our games, and therefore sure to watch us closely, I mean to have a feed there tomorrow night somehow. The road, I am told, is bad on the other side of Angel Dool, and it is our last chance, for if we don't fill their hides here, they will die." I then asked him if he reported to Lambswell, whose run we should enter the next morning. "Yes," he replied, "to the old dog himself too, but he never even asked me to have a drink, nor to stay to lunch, though it was just lunchtime. Moreover, just as I was leaving, he said, 'I know what a grass stealer you are, Pollard, but don't try it on with me, or I'll pound every hoof on you.' To which I replied that every drover in the country knew what a skinflint he was, that he would sooner set fire to his grass than to help a drover make a living by letting his starving beasts eat it. And with that I rode away, leaving him spluttering with rage, for he prides himself on being the most popular man in the district. Another blazing day in the saddle, pushing our starved and weary beasts along with stockwhip and dog, brought us to Nulla Nulla Station, and at the boundary we were met by old one-armed Jack, who had been sent out to see us through the run. He stayed with us till the beasts drew on to the camp about sunset, and then, after warning us that nothing would please old Lambswell better than to pound Pollard's cattle, and we could rely on him to have us watched all night, Jack rode off home to his supper. We were camped on the bare roadside, and just at our back was a paddock containing splendid mixed feed, mostly bluegrass, in which old Lambswill's cattle were feeding, and which was separated from the road by a wire fence. "This is the place I spoke of," said Pollard. "Now, Mulga, off you go to the station and find out what spies Lambswill has set if you can, and then back again as if the bunyip were after you." Mulga needed no second orders. He had been on many such expeditions as this since entering Pollard's service, and knew exactly what was required of him. In less than an hour he came back, breathing heavily after his long run, with the news that a fellow named Mickey was the spy, but that old Lambswill had had the horses kept in the yard and was ready to ride us down on us with Jack and his son Edgar the moment Mickey reported any suspicious movements on our part. It seemed to me that Lambswill had held all the cards, and that all the benefit our cattle would derive from his grass was that they got looking at it through the fence. I did not know Pollard, though. On hearing this news, he asked Mulga if I knew where Mickey was watching us from. "Mind think it Mickey sit down longer that big fellow Bumblebush, boss," said Mulga. "Mind see him light pipe when I come along the track, and mind see his horse back along Box Tree down road." "Good boy, Mulga," said Pollard. "Here's a smoke for you," handing him a plug of black tobacco. "Now go and see if you can steal his horse and plant it where he won't find it till tomorrow." "Right, boss," said Mulga, whose eyes sparkled in the light of the campfire, partly with pleasure derived from the unexpected gift, and partly at the thought of outwitting Mickey, and then he disappeared into the darkness. It was a dark night, there being no moon, and the stars not giving much light on account of the clouds, but still light enough to see a man at a distance of about 50 yards, and a beast perhaps 3 times that distance. Pollard sat smoking by the fire for half an hour after Mulga had gone, and then got up and went to his saddlebag and produced 3 pairs of wire cutters. These he gave to Fegan and myself, and then, after giving us explicit instructions, he mounted his horse and rode round his cattle, stopping and talking to each of the boys on watch as he came to them. Then he rode off till he struck the fence close to where Mickey sat watching his movements. Here he dismounted and cut the wires, keeping one eye on Mickey, who fancied himself unseen as he did so. When he had cut all 5 wires, he rode back towards his cattle and called to the boys to drive them through the gap in the paddock. No sooner had he given those instructions than he saw Mickey slink off to report at the station, and then he gave us the signal to do our part. Jumping on our horses, we galloped to the fence and cut and pulled out the wires from about 4 posts, so as to allow our cattle a free passage into the paddock. And then, going through ourselves, we set to work on old Lambswill's cattle with whip and dog till we had them all mustered up in one corner with the fence on 2 sides. While we were doing this, the boys spread out our starving cattle all over the paddock, where they soon got to work on Lambswill's grass, and then the boys rode back and helped us hold the station cattle in the corner. Shortly after this, Mulga turned up, grinning like a Cheshire cat, showing all his splendid white teeth as he informed us that Mickey, after wasting nearly half an hour searching for his horse, had started on foot for the station, not hurrying himself too much. Pollard came to each of us in turn and gave us strict instructions that when old Tommy Lambswill arrived, nobody was to open his mouth, but we were to leave all the talking to him. It seemed to me a fool's trick. Lambswill would catch us within an hour for certain, and for sake of an hour's feed for our cattle, We should have them all taken to the Gadooga pound and have to pay a fine, besides going back twice over the dry track which we had just come by. Surely, I thought, this game is not worth the candle, and Pollard must be off his head tonight. Nevertheless, I said nothing, as it was Pollard's business, not mine, and Pollard was not a nice customer when crossed. With the others, therefore, I rode silently round the station cattle, keeping them in the corner of the fence as instructed and awaiting developments. I had not long to wait, for before I had gone backwards and forwards a dozen times, I heard horses galloping, and so hurried round to where Pollard sat on his old stock horse, some distance from the cattle we were guarding, looking in the starlight like a graven image such as one sees about the cities on a pedestal. At the head of his men, Mr. Lambswool rode up, chuckling to himself as his clever capture of Pollard. Pulling up his horse when he got close, he said, "Well, Pollard, I've caught you in the act this time, have I? I warned you that I would have you watched, but it seems that you mean to defy me." And Lambswool plainly gloated over his discovery. I hardly recognised Pollard in the humble man who implied, "No, Mr. Lambswool, I had no thought of defying you, nor of stealing your grass either. The fact is we are all done up, horses and men both, watching these brutes. They have led us a dance, rushing every night from the other side of Cunnamulla, and what with the terrible heat in the daytime and loss of sleep at night, we are all half dead. I thought that if we put the cattle in the corner of this paddock for the night, with a wire fence on two sides of them, a few of the boys could hold them once they settled down, and the rest of us could get a few hours' sleep. Then I meant to repair your fence in the morning, and call and explain what I had done when I passed the station, and apologise both for the trespass and for my hasty words to you this afternoon, which, believe me, I am heartily sorry for. I hope you will believe that I am sincere." "No good talking, Pollard, I warned you. I should pound every hoof that trespassed, and pound them I will," chuckled old Lambswool, glad to do an injury to anyone, as was his wont. "Here, men," he continued, turning to Jack and Edgar, who were sitting on their horses behind him, "lend me a hand with these cattle." "Hey, Mr. Lambswool, don't be so hard on a poor man," pleaded Pollard. "As you see, the cattle are not eating your grass. They are jammed together on the fence and hardly have room to lie down," waving his hand to the cattle we were guarding. "I am only trying to make a bare living, and a hard one it is in these badly paid, drought-stricken times, as you know. Don't pound my cattle. I've done you no harm, and will repair your fence in the morning. Have mercy on my wife and little children, whose bread you take out of their mouths if you pound my stock." I knew Pollard to be a bachelor, and this rather amused me, for I began to see the drift in his game now. Mr. Lambswool would not listen, though Pollard's pleading would have moved a heart of stone, and ordering our boys out of the way, he, with the help of Jack and his son, started to head the cattle for the gap in the fence. Our boys blocked them for a little, and then when Pollard called out, "It's no use, boys, the game is up. Let the old hog take 'em," they rode over to where we were sitting on our horses, and we watched the cattle driven off towards Gadooga. "That's a good night's work," said Pollard. "I thought I could work the old fellow up till I made him do just about what I wanted. We will give them 3 hours more to fill up on this grass, and then muster and make tracks out of this quickly. He cannot pound us once we are on the road." Long before daylight, we mustered our cattle and headed once more for Angel Dool, but this time with well-fed, contented beasts. Before leaving, we very carefully repaired old Tommy's fence and obliterated our tracks as well as we could by dragging branches around. I would have given much to see witness to old Tommy Lancewell's discomfiture when at daylight he found himself a long way from home driving his own cattle to the Gadooga pound. Lucky for us, the night was too dark for him to see the brands earlier, but it had been lighter. I suppose Pollard would have not tried that trick. Pollard's acting had, of course, a lot to do with it. He had not tried to prevent Lancewell taking his own cattle. The old fellow might have examined them and more carefully, but the opposition just spurned him on as Pollard intended it should. Old Jack told me years afterwards that it was as good as a play to hear old Lancewell perform, and that he nearly had an apoplectic fit when daylight enabled him to recognise his own brands on the cattle he was driving towards the pound, for till then he had believed them to be Pollard's. Of course, he put the whole blame on Jack and Edgar's shoulders, but the story was not long spreading round the district, and most people were glad to hear how neatly the old fellow had been done. If you should happen to meet Mr. Lancewell in the club next time you go to Sydney, just refer to grass stealing if you want to see a bit of fun. A red rag to a bull is nothing to it. The end. I like that story. I reckon that's classic. Pulling the old switcheroo on Lancewell's cattle. And I would have loved to have seen Lancewell's face in the morning when it became daylight, where he realised he was taking his own cattle to the pound. Okay, that's it for me. I'll get back to you all next time. Bye.